Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we crack open the archives on historical figures who didn't just participate in their fields, they fundamentally redefined them.
Absolutely.
Today, we are focusing on a man whose simple screen image, the one, the bowler hat, the cane, the little mustache, is arguably the single most universally recognizable visual in the history of the 20th century.
Hard to argue with that, Sir Charles Spencer Chaplin Jr.
His life story is almost unbelievable. I mean, a career spanning 75 years, moving from abject Victorian poverty to becoming the world's truly global cinematic icon.
But then ending his career in forced exile from the very country that made him rich and famous.
Exactly. It's this extraordinary dichotomy we want to unpack today. The beloved universal figure versus the controversial, ultimately banished artist.
And the sources for Chaplin's life, they really give us an unparalleled look at one of the most astonishing human trajectories imaginable. Our mission today, essentially, is to trace this dramatic arc. How does a man raised in genuine destitution achieve this unprecedented level of artistic control in Hollywood? How did he use comedy, of all things, to tackle huge global political issues?
And why did he end up paying such a high personal price for his views and, let's face it, his unconventional private life, particularly here in America?
That's the core of it.
So, just to set the stage, maybe with a fact that sums up the sheer distance he traveled. By 1918, Charlie Chaplin wasn't just famous. He was one of the world's best-paid, best-known figures, a total cultural phenomenon.
Unbelievable wealth and recognition.
Yet before he was even 9 years old, he had already endured 2 separate documented stints in a Victorian workhouse.
2 stints. It's staggering.
That leap, from institutionalized poverty to global multimillionaire in less than 20 years, that's where we need to begin.
It really is the definitive rags to riches narrative. So dramatic, actually, that his authorized biographer called it the most dramatic of all the rags to riches stories ever told. I mean, it wasn't hyperbole.
Right. He was born in London, April 16th, 1889, and his life started utterly defined by that relentless harshness of Victorian poverty.
The instability was immediate, right there in his family. His father, Charles Chaplin Sr., was largely absent, an alcoholic, sadly.
Yeah, died young, too, didn't he? Only 38 from cirrhosis.
That's right. Which left his mother, Hannah Chaplin. She used the stage name Lily Harley in this constant, desperate struggle to provide.
Doing what she could, performing, nursing, dressmaking, anything.
Anything. But it was never enough. And it was this constant financial collapse that pushed Chaplin into the institutional system.
So young, too. Just 7 years old when he was first sent away.
7. To Lambeth Workhouse. And if you look at the records from that era, the conditions were just horrifyingly bleak, designed to bring people down.
He later wrote about the Central London District School for Paupers as a forlorn existence. Just sounds soul-crushing.
It was meant to be, stripping away identity. And the family was readmitted to the workhouse system again in 1898, forcing the boys into the Norwood schools for destitute children.
So this wasn't just a temporary rough patch. This was his childhood, scarring institutional life.
Absolutely. And the personal tragedies just kept piling on. When Chaplin was barely a teenager, just 14.
He had to take his own mother to the infirmary.
Yes, she'd suffered a relapse into psychosis. The sources suggest it was tragically caused by a combination of, syphilis and chronic malnutrition. Utterly devastating.
And she never fully recovered.
No. She was committed to care and remained institutionalized until her death in 1928. He carried that,
It's almost impossible to imagine surviving that kind of childhood, let alone using it somehow as a foundation for a career built on making people laugh.
But maybe that trauma is what fueled his singular focus on performance. It was an escape, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And a means of survival.
He got an early start, right? That story about him stepping in for his mother on stage.
Incredible story. He was just 5 years old, in Aldershot. His mother's voice failed, and apparently little Charlie just went out there and finished the set. Did impressions.
Wow, at 5.
He later wrote that his mother imbued me with the feeling that I had some sort of talent. That belief from her was probably crucial, gave him hope.
And his professional journey through the British music hall seems pretty quick after that. He joined that clog dancing troupe.
The 8 Lancashire Lads, around 1899, 1900. Very demanding physical comedy training, essentially.
And he left school entirely by 13, just focused on the stage.
Totally dedicated. By 16, he landed a pretty decent role, playing Billy the Page Boy in a big West End production of Sherlock Holmes, performed alongside the original stage Holmes, William Gillette.
So gaining real experience.
Definitely. But the real turning point, the truly consequential move, came in 1908. His half-brother, Sidney, who was also a performer, managed to get him an audition for Fred Carnot's company.
Carter's company was a big deal, wasn't it? Known for comedy.
Huge. Carnot was a master at spotting and training comedic talent. Stan Laurel was another one of his finds around the same time.
What did Carnot make of him initially?
Well, Carnot apparently saw him as a pale, puny, sullen-looking youngster. Didn't make a great first impression.
Huh. But he must have proved him wrong.
Oh, quickly. Chaplin moved from being basically an apprentice to a starring player in popular sketches like Jimmy the Fearless. He had that spark.
And it was with Carnot that he first came to America, right?
Exactly. He toured North America with the Carnot troupe. He perfected his famous role as the inebriate swell in this long-running sketch called Mumming Birds.
Which they marketed over here as A Night in an English Music Hall.
That's the one. And that U.S. tour was absolutely crucial. It put him directly in the sightlines of the burgeoning American film industry, which was centered in New York and then rapidly moving west.
So Hollywood came calling.
Well, Keystone Studios did.
Yeah.
In 1913, a representative saw him perform and invited him to join Mack Sennett's studio out in California.
What was Chaplin's reaction? Was he keen on films?
Not initially. He was a bit of a theatrical snob, really. He apparently dismissed Keystone's early films as just a crude melange of rough and rumble. All slapstick, no subtlety in his view.
But the money must have talked.
The money definitely talked. The opportunity was just too good to pass up, especially for someone with his background.
Let's just underscore that financial leap again. He started at Keystone for, what was it, $150 a week?
A respectable sum then, but nothing huge. $150 a week.
But its impact on screen was so immediate, so powerful.
Instantaneous. Keystone, and more importantly, the cinema owners, the exhibitors, realized audiences were coming specifically for him.
So by the end of that first year, 1914,
He seized the moment. He knew his value, demanded $1,000 a week.
1,000 from 150.
Yep, and he got it. That's nearly a 7-fold increase in under 12 months. For a guy who just years before was literally living in a workhouse. It's mind-blowing.
It really is. And this meteoric financial rise happened at the exact same time he created cinema's most enduring character, the Tramp.
The birth of the icon. And he described how he deliberately put that costume together, piece by piece, as a series of contradictions.
Right, the baggy pants suggesting freedom, maybe even poverty, but then the tight coat striving for dignity.
Exactly. The small bowler hat, but then those ridiculously large, floppy shoes. And the little mustache, crucial, small enough so it wouldn't hide his facial expressions, which were key to his comedy.
He talked about a specific moment, didn't he, when he first put it all together?
Yeah, a fascinating moment of artistic crystallization. He said he had no idea of the character he was playing until he got dressed. But the instant he was in those paradoxical clothes.
The clothes and the makeup made me feel the person he was. I began to know him, and by the time I walked on stage, he was fully born.
Fully born, just like that. An incredible description of creative discovery.
And that persona debuted very quickly in Kid Auto Races at Venice, February 1914.
That's the first appearance. Though interestingly, he actually filmed Mabel's Strange Predicament earlier, where he also wore the costume. But Kid Auto Races was released first.
Okay. And he didn't always get along with the directors at Keystone initially, did he?
No, he clashed quite a bit. He found the chaotic, purely improvisational style of someone like Mabel Normand, who directed him in Mabel at the Wheel, difficult. He nearly got fired after that film.
But the audience saved him.
The audience absolutely saved him. Exhibitors were clamoring for more Chaplin films.
Yeah.
The public response was just overwhelming.
So Mack Sennett, the head of Keystone, had to listen to the box office.
He had no choice, really. And this gave Chaplin, this complete newcomer, a staggering amount of creative leverage.
So he started directing his own films very early on.
Amazingly early. He was allowed to direct his 12th film, Caught in the Rain. And after that, he directed nearly every single short he made at Keystone.
And he was churning them out at an incredible rate back then.
An almost impossible pace. About one film per week during that intense first year. He basically discovered that stardom, his connection with the audience, was the ultimate form of power in this new industry.
Okay, so once Chaplin proved his sheer commercial clout at Keystone, he didn't just climb the ladder, did he? He essentially started rebuilding the ladder to his own specifications.
That's a great way to put it. His move from Keystone to S&A Studios in late 1914, early 1915, that really solidified his financial independence.
The money jumped again, right?
Oh, yeah. He secured $1,250 a week, plus a hefty $10,000 signing bonus, which was just astronomical money back then.
And critically, this move to SNA is where he began to slow things down a bit, take more time.
Exactly. He started prioritizing quality over just the sheer quantity that Keystone demanded for the short film market. He wanted more control over the final product.
And this allowed the Tramp character to evolve, didn't it? Move beyond the maybe slightly cruder Keystone version.
Definitely. Some critics noted the early Tramp could be a bit mean, crude, and brutish at times. At SNA, the character started to become gentler, more romantic.
You see that pathos emerging, right? That
Yeah.
blend of comedy and sadness.
Absolutely. Films like The Tramp itself from 1915 really established this. And then a film like The Bank, also in 1915, did something really innovative for comedy films at the time.
What was that?
It had a genuinely sad ending, integrating that sense of melancholy, that pathos, directly into the slapstick structure. That was pretty groundbreaking. Audiences weren't used to crying at comedies.
And this richer character, this blend of humor and heart, just exploded globally, didn't it? This Chaplinitis
That is
phenomenon.
madness, total global phenomenon. Merchandise was everywhere, dolls, cartoons, songs, Chaplin look-alike contests, you name it.
There was a study in 1917 calling him an American obsession. But it was bigger than that, wasn't it? He was cinema's first truly international, universally recognized star. Everyone knew the Tramp.
Everywhere. Across language barriers, across cultures, the visual comedy was universal.
And this worldwide adoration, it fueled just unbelievable wealth. When he signed with Mutual Film Corporation in 1916,
The mutual contract, that was the big one, $670,000 a year.
$670,000 a year. In 1916, he was 26 years old.
It made him one of the highest paid people on the entire planet. Think about that journey from the workhouse again. It's just staggering.
He apparently looked back on those Mutual years where he made films like Easy Street, The Cure, The Immigrant. He called them the happiest period of his career.
He had incredible resources, creative freedom within Mutual's framework, and he produced 12, just absolutely brilliant, 2 real comedies. Many consider them his finest short works.
But even that level of wealth and fame working at Mutual, it still wasn't enough for his drive for complete autonomy, was it?
No, because ultimately the studios, even ones paying him that much, still held the final financial and distribution control. They owned the negatives, decided how films were released.
So he made another revolutionary move in 1919, teaming up with other huge stars.
The formation of United Artists, it was him, Douglas Fairbanks, the great action star, Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart, and the highly influential, though controversial, director D.W. Griffith.
And this wasn't just another studio, was it? It was fundamentally different.
Completely different. United Artists wasn't set up to produce films itself initially. It was conceived as a distribution company, owned entirely by the artists.
So they could finance and produce their own films independently?
Exactly. And then use UA to distribute them, bypassing the traditional studio system. It basically allowed the biggest stars in the world to take back the means of production and distribution.
Guaranteeing themselves complete creative and financial control, eliminating the studio middleman.
It was an unprecedented power play in Hollywood history. Hugely significant.
And now, with that total control locked down via United Artists, Chaplin could really focus on longer, more ambitious projects, feature films.
Yes, his first full feature-length film, distributed by UA, was The Kid in 1921. Runs about 68 minutes.
And this one was deeply personal for him, wasn't it?
Extremely personal. It was heavily influenced by the tragic death of his own infant son, Norman Spencer Chaplin, just days after birth, shortly before production began.
You can feel that loss in the film. And also echoes of his own childhood, surely. The poverty, the threat of separation.
Absolutely. His own experiences in orphanages and workhouses are woven into the story of the tramp finding and raising the abandoned child, played brilliantly by Jackie Coogan.
And it's remembered as one of the first films to really successfully, seamlessly blend that heavy drama, the heartbreak of potential separation with his signature comedy. It worked incredibly well.
A massive success, critically and commercially. It proved features could handle that mix.
He even tried to step away from the Tramp persona briefly, didn't he? With A Woman of Paris.
Yes, in 1923, a very interesting experiment. It was a sophisticated, purely dramatic feature. He directed it, but only appeared in a tiny, uncredited cameo.
It was intended as a vehicle for his longtime leading lady, Edna Purviance.
Exactly. He wanted to show she could be a serious, dramatic actress. And critics actually praised the film for its innovative, subtle, restrained acting style. It was trying to move away from the more theatrical melodrama common then.
But the audience.
The audience rejected it, flat out. They wanted Chaplin the Tramp. They weren't interested in Chaplin as a serious director of dramas. It was a commercial failure.
So a lesson learned there, that he and the Tramp were, in the public eye at least, inseparable.
A hard lesson, perhaps, but a clear one. So he returned to the Tramp for his next UA feature, creating what many, including Chaplin himself at the time, considered his masterpiece, The Gold Rush in 1925.
Inspired by the Klondike Gold Rush.
Right.
But also darker stories.
Yes, he was reading books about the Klondike, but he was also fascinated by the grim story of the Donner Party. The pioneers trapped in the snow, resorting to cannibalism. That darkness underlies the comedy.
And the production itself was huge for the time, cost almost $1 million.
A massive budget in 1925, shot partly on location in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It resulted in some of the most iconic sequences in film history.
The Dance of the Rolls, obviously.
Classic. Unforgettable. And that incredibly famous, sort of heartbreakingly funny scene where the starving tramp cooks and eats his own leather boot, treating the laces like spaghetti.
It's comedy, but it's also about desperation and survival. That Chaplin blend again?
Perfectly. But just as Chaplin reached this absolute peak of silent filmmaking artistry and control, the entire industry was about to change fundamentally.
The arrival of sound, the
talkies, and Chaplin was deeply, deeply resistant.
Why? Was it just artistic snobbery?
Partly, perhaps.
Yeah.
He genuinely believed sound lacked the sort of poetry and artistry of silent film, the universal language of mime and gesture. But there was a very practical concern, too.
Giving the Tramp a voice.
Exactly. He feared that giving the Tramp a specific voice, with a specific accent in a specific language, would immediately destroy his universal appeal. The Tramp spoke to everyone through silence. A voice would limit him, tie him down.
So he fought against the tide, as Hollywood rushed to embrace sound.
He fought it brilliantly, using his independence through United Artists. His 1931 release, City Lights, came out years after sound films had become the absolute norm.
But he insisted it remain silent.
Almost entirely silent in terms of dialogue. What he did, though, was compose a complete, fully synchronized musical score wrote the music himself, and he incorporated carefully placed sound effects for comedic or dramatic timing, but no spoken words from the main characters.
And how was that received? A silent film in the sound era?
It was a massive triumph, critically acclaimed, hugely popular with audiences worldwide. It proved his artistic vision could still connect. It's a film Chaplin personally cited as his favorite of all his works.
The production was notoriously long, though, wasn't it?
Unbelievably long. Something like 21 months of shooting. Constant takes, endless refinement. That kind of perfectionism was only possible because he was his own boss, financing it himself through UA. No studio would have tolerated that schedule.
And he continued this resistance to some extent with his next film, too, Modern Times in 1936.
Yes. Modern Times is fascinating. It's fundamentally a satire on, well, modern times, industrialization, labor conditions, the dehumanizing effect of machinery and capitalism.
Themes he was clearly concerned about observing the world during the Great Depression.
Absolutely. And again, it largely relies on synchronized music, which he composed, and sound effects to tell its story. It's often called the last great silent film, even though it came out deep into the sound era.
But there is one moment where the Tramp speaks, isn't there, famously?
One single iconic instance. He has to sing a song in a restaurant scene, but he forgets the words. So he makes up this complete gibberish song, a kind of double-talk nonsense language performed with perfect mime.
Proving his point in a way, that the character's language was physical, universal, not verbal.
Precisely. It's a brilliant meta-commentary on the whole talkie debate. But critics and audiences couldn't miss the film's overtly political message this time. The critique of the system was much more explicit. And once Chaplin started using that unparalleled global platform, not just for social commentary hidden within comedy, but for overt political statements, well, the shift in his public standing, especially in the U.S., was quite swift and ultimately very painful for him.
The 1940s seemed to be the turning point, an era of just relentless controversy, legal attacks, and a real decline in his popular favor over here.
It really was, and you can almost pinpoint the moment the line was crossed, publicly at least. His first true sound film, The Great Dictator, released in 1940.
An incredibly daring film for its time, directly satirizing Adolf Hitler and fascism.
Hugely daring. Remember, this was before the U.S. entered World War II. There was enormous pressure on him not to make it, warnings it was too controversial, that it would alienate audiences, even provoke international incidents.
And he played two roles, didn't he? The persecuted Jewish barber and the Hitler parody Adenoid Hinkle.
Yes, using that uncanny physical resemblance. They were born only 4 days apart in 1889, Both had the little mustache. The visual parallel was deliberate and hauntingly effective.
But the truly controversial part, the bit that really changed things, came right at the end.
The final speech, absolutely. Chaplin drops the Hinkle character, even arguably the Barber character, looks directly into the camera and delivers this passionate 5-minute speech.
As himself. As Charlie Chaplin.
Essentially, yes. Pleading for peace, for democracy, for humanity, railing against greed, hatred, and intolerance, directly attacking the dictators.
And that was the point of no return, in a way.
Film critics and biographers generally agree. That overt preaching, dropping the artistic veil between the performer and the citizen, irrevocably linked Chaplin to political causes in the public mind. People couldn't just enjoy the Tramp's comedy anymore. They were forced to confront Chaplin's own politics. And that began the serious decline in his U.S. popularity.
And this growing political scrutiny unfortunately coincided with some absolute messes in his private life, which his opponents seized upon.
Immediately. It became instant fodder for public scandal and political ammunition. The affair with the aspiring actress Joan Barry blew up spectacularly,
resulting in that highly publicized paternity suit, which seems like a case study in injustice looking back.
It really does, because the science was actually clear. Blood tests were performed back then, and they conclusively excluded Chaplin as the father. The child's blood group was B. Chaplin's, was O. Genetically impossible for him to be the father. Basic biology.
But that evidence wasn't allowed in court.
Incredibly, no. California law at the time deemed blood test evidence inadmissible in paternity cases. The juries had to decide based on other testimony, on perceived character, on emotional appeals.
And the jury found against him?
Twice, in fact, after appeals. He was ordered to pay child support until the child turned 21. It was a staggering public humiliation and a legal travesty, frankly. And it just poured fuel on the political fire already burning against him.
A fire being actively stoked by J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI.
Oh, definitely. Hoover had harbored deep suspicions about Chaplin's politics for years.
Yeah.
His perceived left-leaning sympathies, his attendance at functions supporting Russian war relief during WWII, his general anti-authoritarian stance.
Even though Chaplin always denied being a communist.
Consistently denied it. He called himself a peacemonger, sometimes a citizen of the world. But in the rapidly chilling climate of the Cold War and the burgeoning Red Scare, nuance didn't matter. That was enough for Hoover.
And the FBI saw the Barry paternity scandal as a golden opportunity.
The perfect opportunity to discredit him. They launched a comprehensive smear campaign, feeding negative stories to sympathetic journalists like Hedda Hopper and Walter Winchell, aiming to destroy his reputation and paint him as morally bankrupt and politically dangerous.
This even led to federal charges against him, didn't it, under the Mann Act?
Yes, an almost unbelievably cynical prosecution. The Mann Act, originally designed to combat sex trafficking, outlawed transporting women across state lines for immoral purposes.
And they charged Chaplin based on his relationship with Joan Barry?
Correct. It was widely seen, even then, as what one biographer called an absurd prosecution, a clear attempt to use a law designed for something else entirely to persecute a political target on morality grounds.
Was he convicted?
No. Thankfully, he was acquitted of the Mann Act charges.
Yeah.
But the damage was done. The trial itself, the accusations, the relentless negative press, it caused catastrophic harm to his public image.
It was compared to the Fatty Arbuckle scandal in the 1920s in terms of public relations disasters.
Exactly. That level of scandal. It cemented this image of him in certain quarters as decadent, immoral, and un-American.
And amidst all this chaos, the trials, the FBI investigations, the public condemnation, he gets married again to someone very young.
Yes. In 1943, he married 18-year-old Una O'Neill. Chaplin himself was 54 at the time.
Which naturally caused another huge public scandal. More fuel for his detractors, proof of his supposed immorality.
Absolutely. Una was the daughter of the famous playwright Eugene O'Neill, who completely disowned her over the marriage. But remarkably, perhaps, this marriage lasted.
It did, didn't it? They stayed together until Chaplin's death.
They did. They had 8 children together, and by all accounts, it was a genuinely happy and supportive marriage. Ona provided stability in the midst of the storm. Chaplin often said he had finally found perfect love with her.
But the political attacks just kept coming relentlessly, and his next film seemed to almost invite them.
Monsieur Verdoux, released in 1947. This film essentially sealed his fate in America. It was a radical departure.
A dark comedy about a serial killer.
A very dark comedy, inspired by the real-life French serial killer Henri Désiré Lambrou. Chaplin plays Verdoux, a polite, charming man who marries and then murders wealthy widows for their money to support his real family during a depression.
Risky subject matter, to say the least.
Extremely. But it wasn't just the subject matter. The film's core message was deeply critical of capitalism in the modern state. Verdu argues, essentially, that his small-scale murders are insignificant compared to the mass killings sanctioned by society through wars in the arms industry. As a mass killer, he says at his trial, I am an amateur.
Wow, that's pulling no punches. How did that go down in post-war, Cold War America?
Predictably terribly. The film was literally booed at its premiere. It failed commercially across the U.S. The accusations of communist sympathies exploded. He was openly denounced on the floor of Congress.
Congressman Johnny Rankin calling for his deportation.
Yes, claiming Chaplin's life and work were detrimental to the moral fabric of America. The political climate had become incredibly hostile. The pressure on him to leave or be forced out was becoming immense.
Despite all that hostility, he managed to make one more film in the U.S.
One final American film, Limelight, released in 1952. And it feels like a summing up, in many ways.
It's quite autobiographical, isn't it? About a fading star.
Deeply reflective, yes. He plays Calvero, an aging, once famous music hall comedian struggling with alcoholism and the loss of his audience, mirroring Chaplin's own feelings of fading popularity and perhaps obsolescence in the face of the controversies.
And it's famous for one particular casting choice, too.
The only time Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton appeared on screen together. Two giants of silent comedy, sharing poignant scenes about the end of an era. It's incredibly moving, knowing their histories.
So Limelight is completed, ready for release, and then the final blow comes while he's traveling.
Exactly. He and Una were sailing across the Atlantic for the London premiere of Limelight. While they were en route, the U.S. Attorney General, James McGranary, announced that Chaplin's re-entry permit had been revoked.
Meaning he wouldn't be allowed back into the United States?
Not unless he submitted to a formal inquiry by the immigration authorities regarding his political views and his moral behavior. It was the final official rejection.
What was Chaplin's reaction?
He was done. Utterly exhausted by the years of attacks, the scandals, the political hounding. He famously declared he was fed up of America's insults and moral pomposity.
So he just cut ties?
Immediately.
Yeah.
He announced he wouldn't even try to go back under those conditions. He sent Una back briefly to settle their affairs and liquidate his assets, and then he, Una, and their children settled permanently in Corsier-sur-Vevey, Switzerland. His exile began.
And he channeled that bitterness, that sense of betrayal, into his next film, Made in Europe.
Oh, yes. His 1957 film, A King in New York, is a direct and often quite bitter satire attacking McCarthyism, the paranoia of the Red Scare, celebrity culture, and American consumerism. It was his cinematic revenge, in a way.
It's fascinating to really get why Chaplin commanded such loyalty from audiences, but also attracted such controversy, and why he could even afford to go into exile. We probably need to dig into how he actually made his films. His process sounds unique.
Absolutely unique and utterly dictatorial, which is key to understanding both his genius and, perhaps, some of the friction he caused. The reason he fought so hard for that artistic control, founding United Artists, was because his method demanded it.
How so? What was so different?
Well, primarily his reliance on improvisation. At least until The Great Dictator in 1940, he almost never worked from a completed script.
No script for feature films.
He'd start with maybe just a vague premise, a simple situation. Charlie enters a health spa or Charlie finds a baby. That might be it.
So how did the film get made?
Through an incredibly elaborate, time-consuming, and frankly expensive process of trial and error on camera. He would build the sets, bring in the actors, and then work out every gag, every bit of business, every story point right there on the studio floor.
Filming it all as he went, experimenting.
Yeah. Constantly filming, experimenting, refining. He'd shoot scenes, watch the rushes, change things, reshoot. This resulted in those immense production periods that were just completely unheard of for anyone else at the time.
We mentioned City Lights taking 21 months. What about The Kid?
His biographer, David Robinson, calculated that for The Kid, Chaplin shot over 53 feet of film for every single foot that made it into the final cut. That's a shooting ratio of 53.1. Astronomical.
Only possible if you own the studio, basically.
Essentially, yes. Or have the complete financial backing and independence that United Artists afforded him. No conventional studio would ever tolerate that kind of process or expense.
And this leads to the dictatorial aspect, because he was figuring it all out himself.
Exactly. Robinson notes he completely dominated every aspect of the work. He was the director, the producer, the writer, even without a script, the editor, increasingly the composer, and of course the star, all at once.
Total control.
Total. And he was an absolute perfectionist. Sources reveal he could lapse into intense frustration, sometimes becoming quite tyrannical on set, demanding his actors, even great talents like Buster Keaton in Limelight, or the child actors like Jackie Coogan, imitate his exact movements, his exact timing, his exact delivery.
He wanted them to be extensions of himself.
Pretty much.
Mm.
He knew exactly the effect he wanted, and he insisted on getting it, often by demonstrating it himself and expecting precise replication. Film historians really see him as one of the very first true auteur filmmakers because his personal vision was the absolute unchallenged center of every single production.
But that intense control, that singular vision, is also what created his unique style, right? That perfect blend of slapstick and genuine emotion.
Unquestionably. His comedy, even the slapstick, was rarely just crude pratfalls. It was usually restrained, quite intellectual, often described as balletic. It was rooted entirely in the Tramp's character, that inherent dignity, that resilience, that almost poignant attitude he maintained, even when facing disaster or suffering.
He had that great quote about ridicule being defiance.
Yes. Ridicule, I suppose, is an attitude of defiance. We must laugh in the face of our helplessness against the forces of nature or go insane.
Mm.
Comedy as a survival mechanism, which makes sense, given his childhood.
And his work always carried that strong undercurrent of social commentary, didn't it? Directly linked to his own life.
Always. His early films often just implicitly highlighted the struggles of the poor, the marginalized, the immigrant people he knew. But later, especially from modern times onwards, the commentary became much more overt, much more political.
Modern times taking on industrial conditions.
The great dictator attacking fascism head-on.
Monsieur Verdoux critiquing capitalism and war.
And even after his exile, A King in New York, directly savaging McCarthyism and American consumer culture. His own life experiences were constantly feeding directly into his art.
You mentioned the orphanage trauma in The Kid.
His parents' troubled lives reflected in Limelight. His exile experience fueling A King in New York. It's all deeply autobiographical, even within the fiction.
And we can't overlook his music. It's a significant part of his legacy, often underappreciated.
Hugely significant. He was apparently a self-taught musician, became quite proficient on the piano, violin, and cello, passionate about music.
And he started composing the scores for his own films.
Yes, once sound technology allowed for synchronized scores, he took control of that too. Started with City Lights in 1931, he composed the music for all his subsequent films. And he even went back later and wrote scores for his earlier silent features like The Gold Rush and The Kid when they were re-released.
How did he actually compose if he wasn't formally trained in notation?
It was a fascinating collaborative process. He couldn't read or write music fluently, so he'd work very closely with skilled musical arrangers and conductors. He'd hum melodies, play themes on the piano or cello, describe the exact mood, the tempo, the feeling he wanted for each scene, often acting it out.
And the arrangers would transcribe and orchestrate his ideas.
Exactly. But the core musical ideas, the themes, the emotional tone that came directly from Chaplin. And he was remarkably successful at it.
Some of his tunes became big hits, right?
Oh yeah. Smile, the theme from Modern Times, lyrics were added later, is an absolute standard. And This Is My Song, which he wrote for his final film, A Countess from Hong Kong in 1967, was actually a huge #1 hit across Europe, sung by Petula Clark.
And he even won an Oscar for his music eventually.
In a wonderful sort of historical corrective. Because Limelight hadn't been shown in Los Angeles back in 1952 due to the political boycotts, it technically didn't qualify for Oscars then. But when it finally got its proper LA release decades later, in 1972,
It qualified.
it qualified.
Yeah.
And in 1973, Chaplin won his only competitive Academy Award for Best Original Dramatic Score for Limelight. Long after the exile had ended, long after the U.S. boycott had faded. A nice bit of delayed justice.
Speaking of making amends, the U.S. did eventually welcome him back, didn't they, after decades of exile?
Yes, finally. By the early 1970s, the political climate had changed, the bitterness had eased somewhat. The American film establishment, perhaps feeling a bit guilty, wanted to honor him.
So he returned in 1972 for the Academy Awards.
He did. For the first time since being barred in 1952, he came back to accept an honorary Academy Award. The citation read it was for the incalculable effect he has had in making motion pictures the art form of this century.
And the reception he got.
Legendary. He received a 12-minute standing ovation, the longest in the history of the Academy Awards. It was this incredibly powerful, emotional moment of reconciliation, of forgiveness, of acknowledging his immense contribution. You can watch the footage. He was clearly overwhelmed.
He received other honors later, too. Knighthood.
Yes, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II in 1975, becoming Sir Charles Chaplin. Recognition from his home country. Despite all the decades of controversy, the exile, the scandals, his place in history is secure. He's still widely seen as, arguably, the single most important artist cinema has ever produced, its most universal icon.
He passed away peacefully in Switzerland, didn't he?
Yes, on Christmas Day, 1977, at the age of 88, at his home in Corsier-sur-Beauvais. A long life, incredibly lived.
But even in death, there was one last bizarre chapter.
Unbelievably, yes. Just a few months after his burial in the local cemetery, in March 1978, his body was stolen from its grave.
Stolen? Why?
By two unemployed mechanics, immigrants from Poland and Bulgaria, who were hoping to extort a ransom from the Chaplin family. A rather grim and desperate crime.
Did they succeed?
No. Una refused to pay, saying Charlie would have found the idea ridiculous. The police launched a major investigation, tapped the phones, and eventually caught the grave robbers. Chaplin's coffin was found buried in a field nearby.
Good grief. What happened then?
He was reinterred in the original grave, but this time the family took precautions. The vault was encased in reinforced concrete to prevent any repeat attempts. A final, strange footnote to an extraordinary life. His legacy also extends into, of all things, intellectual property law. That 1928 lawsuit you mentioned, Chaplin v. Amador.
Right. What was the significance of that?
It established a really important legal precedent, one that still resonates today. The court essentially ruled that a performer's distinctive, highly recognizable persona in this case, the Tramp's specific costume, his unique way of moving, his mustache, his whole style, is entitled to legal protection.
Protection from what?
From deliberate mimicry intended to confuse or deceive the public. Basically saying you can't just copy someone's entire iconic act and pass it off as your own or imply their involvement. It helped define the idea that a performance itself, a persona, could be a form of artistic intellectual property.
That feels incredibly fitting, doesn't it? Protecting his unique identity, because that identity, that blend of dignity and vulnerability, defiance and pathos, was the core of everything.
Absolutely. He understood, maybe better than anyone, that his universal appeal embodied in the Tramp was his ultimate leverage. It allowed him to gain that unprecedented creative control, ensuring his vision, including his sometimes uncomfortable social commentary, reached the widest possible audience, even if it came at great personal cost.
So the journey from being literally institutionalized in a London workhouse as a child to becoming arguably the most famous person on earth, a multimillionaire icon, only to be systematically rejected, effectively banished by the nation that largely built his fortune, primarily because he insisted on being an unapologetic social critic.
Yeah.
It's just one of the most astonishing dramatic narratives in modern history.
Truly unparalleled.
Yeah.
The highs were higher, and the fall from grace in America was steeper than almost any other comparable figure.
So, as you, our listeners, reflect on Chaplin's mastery, that incredible ability he had to make an audience laugh and cry, sometimes in the very same scene, and you think about the profound personal price he ultimately paid for his commitment to his art and to his political voice, maybe consider this.
Well.
In our own age, where artists, celebrities, public figures can face instant and often overwhelming public and political backlash for expressing views, how much absolute control does an artist truly need today to maintain their integrity and their voice? And is the purity of that artistic vision, that uncompromising stance, always worth the potential cost, whether it's public acceptance, career prospects, or, in Chaplin's extreme case, even exile?